Hi, I want to talk to you about Lysistrata, give you some notes before we read, and you can certainly come back to this if you need to review. Lysistrata was written in 412 BC and first performed at the Athenian festival in 411 BC. This was during the 19th year of the civil war between Sparta and Athens. The play was written by Aristophanes, who lived from 448 to 385 BC. The Peloponnesian War, going on at this time, was from 431 to 404. Lysistrata was the boldest and the final of Aristophanes' three plays written on the subject of war. And the first of these plays was The Arcanians, the second was Peace. He wrote this because times were desperate. The war was a colossal failure, the cause was lost, and the fighting continued to go on, destroying resources, losing money. His play was to be a message to stop before it was too late. It was unsuccessful. The Peloponnesian War was the war that was happening during the time that he performed. He wrote and performed the play. And in short, here's what happened. The Spartans were suspicious of Athenians' wealth and power, jealous of it, and the peace treaty, the 30-year peace treaty that they had created prior, was not holding. Chauvinistic and power-hungry, the Athenians were ready to assert their power over Sparta. The Spartans were looking to fight a land war. They outnumbered in population the Athenians 2-1, and they thought if they had a land war, the battle would be short, they'd win. That was it. The Athenians, on the other hand, having a harbor and a strong navy, preferred a naval battle. They didn't have the money for a long battle. The Athenian leader of Pericles died in the second year of the war. Athens was devastated by a plague, but they attempted to maintain their war strategy. Fast forward 10 years, still fighting. Sparta and Athens eventually signed a 50-year peace treaty thanks to Nicias. But soon, Nicias' rival Alcibiades convinced Athens to attack the Greek city-states in Sicily and bring them under Athenian empire, under Athenian rule. This was an unsuccessful disaster. The fleet was destroyed at Syracuse. Athens was left powerless. The Persians then united with Sparta and attacked Athens. Athens surrendered in 404 BC, and the Golden Age was ended. As for Greek comedy, the purpose, as I mentioned, of Greek comedy was to amuse and to criticize, to make laughter succeed where rage and tears, not to mention common sense, had failed. Its origin came from ancient fertility rites, and often had some pretty bawdy, outrageous language and a daring plot. It's not going to be like tragedy, which was traditional, seeped in old legend and myth. Lysistrata, the main character of the same name of the play, has an absurd plot to end the war. Sensible. So as you read, you're going to notice it's bawdy, it's raunchy, there's a lot of physical humor, puns, and sexually explicit language. But even as you're laughing, you're going to notice tragedy within that comedy. Let's look at some Greek words and their derivation to discuss some Greek comedy with you. Komodia, the odia part of the word komodia, from which we get comedy, means song. Kom means festival or revel, partying. From which we get komos. We break free from the restraint with a holiday or a party. Kome means village. Koma means sleep. And you can see here this idea of an unconscious dream fulfilled, what men really want to do, to have. Komon means phallus, and that's a reference to male genitalia. While the tragedy probes the anguish of man when confronted with the limits of his mortality, comedy, on the other hand, will celebrate a liberation from these limits. You'll see a celebration of life, an idyllic life in the courtyard, agricultural festivals, fertility rituals. And it began with the leaders of the phallic processions. You're hearing that word a lot. You'll continue to. Greek Old Comedy developed under Athenian democracy in late 5th century BC. And Aristophanes is the only poet from whom we have possession of complete plays. He had two other comedy writing rivals, but we don't have complete plays of theirs. Old comedy is highly political, satirical, it's often lampooning and ridiculing, much like a roast. People will be called out by name. You would see direction at politicians of the time. It would be directed at poets, people believed to be quacks or frauds, philosophers, thinkers, local celebrities, institutions like education or politics, society, and its groups. You're going to read lots of references and allusions, and we'll look up as many and go through as many as we can, but in all honesty, even people of the time, Aristotle even missed many of these references. There was little threat of reprisal. There was almost complete free speech at the time, and that makes old comedy a bit of a unique entity in the history of Western literature. So freedom of speech here, the word for that is parrhesia, which translates to speaking everything. You're going to read lots of obscenity and scatology, which is humor having to do with excrement and excretion. Ready for a read aloud? Different from tragedy, you're going to see 4 rather than 3 actors on stage. They'll wear grotesque masks. The masks are grotesque because these characters aren't people who are higher up, as you would see in tragedy. They are lower, ordinary people in society who probably have something ugly about them in character, so their masks were grotesque. They would wear elaborate costumes. Their backsides would be padded. The male actors on stage would wear outrageously oversized phalluses made of leather. This broke taboo. It was funny. They had free reign, remember. The chorus for these pieces are going to be 24 in number, and soon you'll see why they needed more than the 12 or 15 that the tragedians used. The structure of the play is this. It'll begin with a prologue, and that's similar to what you saw in Oedipus. Exposition, sort of one character starting. And then it'll move into the agon, which is a contest, a debate between the protagonist and the chorus. Kind of the setting of the problem or the announcement of the issue. And then there's the peribasis, which translates to turning aside. Here the chorus will address directly the audience. So represent the poet's view, and will often celebrate the poet, sort of cheerleading for the poet to win the contest. This part is modified in Lysistrata. Aristophanes moves this a little bit to fit the conflict. And then there's going to be a series of episodes, and the piece will end with the Exodus. I'm going to read quite a bit, as I mentioned, explicit language for sexual activity as well as scatological references. Aristophanes won't euphemize or sugarcoat sexual references. He's just going to go straight to the vulgar. So we're going to have to be mature and handle that amongst our laughter. He was smashing taboo, and it made people laugh. It's important to note that this is obscene, totally obscene, absolutely vulgar. It's not pornographic. It's to arouse thinking and laughter, not other things. Okay. The typical plot of old comedy centers on 2 key elements. First, the Aristophanes hero, who's typically male, a farmer, or of a pastoral country setting. He's of lower middle class, he earns an honest living, and he's always game to gorge himself with too much food or too much drink. He'll pilfer and steal and take as he can. He's always game for sexual gratification, but he would not accept that behavior from a female. Plays often open with the hero's distress over some feature, aspect, component of contemporary society. He's got a bone to pick. He'll be unable to convince others initially of their folly and will set out on his own, putting into effect the fantastic scheme intended to set things right. This fantastic scheme will put our hero at odds with the chorus, who is eventually won over, as well as some authority figure. The play will end with a triumphant exit. It'll seem like society's ill has been cured, and our hero redeemed, victorious. It's going to be a lot like watching a Monty Python movie. If that's something you enjoy, you'll see the similarities. As far as Aristophanes' style, it's funny. The idea was to be hilarious and uproarious, and the play was received as such. He won many first-place contests. You're going to read lots of topical references or allusions, as previously mentioned. This is satire, the thinking person's humor. So while you're laughing, you're going to have to remember that there's an underlying point, a reason. And he will poke at people, institutions, social divisions, manners, the political process. You're going to read quite a few puns. You're going to see juxtaposition of words together that don't necessarily go together. He was an imaginative, original writer, coined new words, as Shakespeare does. Characters you'll meet are not, again, of a higher type, like those in the tragedies. These are common folk, and we can laugh at them. Here you'll see what each character name means. Lysistrata is the disbander of armies. Kalanike is dried weed. Myrrhine is a reference to female genitalia. It's slang of the time. Lampedo, the chorus is going to be of 24, and you're going to see it divided between old men and old women. That's key to plot. And then later on, right before the Exodus, you're going to see Spartans and Athenians in the chorus. You'll meet kinesias, which means movement. In this case, we're talking about sexual movement. And several other bit parts. In this play, in Lysistrata, the Athenian women are tired of the Peloponnesian War. Their husbands aren't home, it's gone on forever, and they take matters into their own hands. They barricade themselves in the Acropolis. They orchestrate a sex strike in order to force their husbands to vote for peace with Sparta. It's set largely on a street in Athens in front of a gate to the Acropolis. I'm going to talk about the structure of a classic play, and then I'll have a mini assignment for you to tackle. In the Art of Poetry, 350 BC, Aristotle writes of 3 unities, 3 keys to the structure of a classic play. First, he talks about place. A stage represents a single locale, and generally that single locale is before an architectural structure on a street. Rule number 1, if you will. Secondly, the unity of time. The plot of a classic play should recount the events of a single day, 24 hours. And the unity of action. The action should follow one storyline, no subplots. And over time, some things have changed, but this, until about the 20th century or so, is largely the rules that playwrights followed. This is called the 3 unities, or the classical unities, or Aristotle's unities. Okay. I'm going to have you head to Schoology, take a look at the assignment that's posted. You're going to be watching some television and seeing if you can work with the 3 unities. I've also posted in Schoology for you a handout just on the 3 unities in case you need another look. Thank you. Or later.